Blind faith? More like blindsided. Ever notice how some folks will believe just about anything if you slap a holy book on it? It's like the mere presence of sacred text turns off their critical thinking. That's blind faith, and it's not pretty. It leads to arguments, misunderstandings, and a whole lot of disappointment. It's time for a reality check. We need to look in the mirror and ask ourselves some tough questions. We need to talk about why a lot of us atheists think faith, especially the organized kind, isn't just silly. It's downright dangerous. It can stifle progress and promote ignorance. We're talking about the kind of faith that builds empires on fear, justifies wars with divine decrees, and shuns anyone who dares to question the status quo. This is the faith that divides and conquers. This isn't about bashing believers. It's about understanding the impact of blind faith on society. It's about protecting everyone from the very real harm that blind faith can inflict. From physical harm to emotional trauma, the effects are far-reaching. Let's deep dive into why faith and harm often go hand in hand. It's a complex issue, but one we need to explore. Why should you care if people have faith? Because when faith dictates public policy, we all pay the price. Decisions made on faith can affect everyone, regardless of their personal beliefs. We're talking about real-world consequences here, folks. These are not abstract issues. They impact our daily lives. Think about it. Politicians making decisions based on ancient scriptures instead of scientific evidence. This can lead to policies that are out of touch with modern realities. Schools teaching creationism alongside evolution as if they hold equal weight. This undermines scientific literacy and critical thinking. Women denied basic health care because some old guys in robes think they own women's bodies. This is a direct attack on women's rights and autonomy. This isn't about some philosophical debate in a dusty library. It's about real people and real lives. This is about the air we breathe, the schools our kids attend, the laws that govern our lives. These are fundamental issues that affect everyone. When faith trumps reason in the public sphere, we all lose. So yeah, it matters. It matters a lot. Our future depends on it. Because the future depends on our ability to tell the difference between faith-based fantasy and reality. We must prioritize reason and evidence to build a better world. Let's be honest, folks. Throughout history, faith has been the go-to tool for control. Kings and queens used it to justify their rule, claiming divine right. Dictators still do it today, using religion to silence dissent. Think about it. What's more convenient for a power-hungry leader than a population that blindly follows orders? No questions asked. Faith becomes the ultimate weapon of mass manipulation, and that is reckless and dangerous. Faith and critical thinking are like oil and water, they just don't mix. Faith thrives on blind acceptance, while critical thinking demands evidence and questioning. And let's be real, questioning the Almighty isn't exactly encouraged in most religions, is it? When you base your entire worldview on ancient texts and unquestionable dogma, you're basically shutting down your brain's ability to think critically. And in a world drowning in misinformation and complex problems, we need all the critical thinking we can get. You know what else faith is really good at? Dividing people. It creates invisible lines that separate us. It's like a giant sorting hat, separating us into us versus them based on what God we believe in or what rituals we follow. These divisions can be deeply ingrained and hard to overcome. Think about all the wars fought, the families torn apart, the friendships ruined, the hatred spewed all in the name of some deity or another. It's a cycle of conflict that seems never-ending. It's enough to make you lose your faith in humanity. But it doesn't have to be this way. We're all human beings trying to navigate this crazy thing called life. We share more similarities than differences. The last thing we need is faith building more walls between us. We should be using faith to bring us together. It's time to tear down these walls and start building bridges of understanding instead. Let's focus on what unites us, rather than what divides us. Remember that whole love thy neighbor thing? Yeah, well, it seems like some folks miss that memo. Because when it comes to social progress, faith has a nasty habit of slamming on the brakes. Whether it's LGBTQ plus rights, women's rights, or racial equality, faith has been used to justify discrimination and oppression for far too long. It's time to stop clinging to outdated beliefs and start embracing a more just and equitable world for everyone. Let's face it, we're all vulnerable at some point in our lives. We get sick, we lose loved ones, we face uncertainty and fear. But the problem arises when religious institutions exploit that vulnerability for their own gain, whether it's financial, political, or otherwise. Preying on the vulnerable is never okay, no matter what God you pray to. Ever notice how many religions rely on fear to keep their followers in line? Fear of hellfire, fear of eternal damnation, fear of God's wrath. It's enough to make you sleep with a nightlight. Fear might be an effective motivator in the short term, but it's not a sustainable way to live your life. It breeds anxiety, distrust, and a whole lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms. We deserve better than to live in fear of some imaginary punishment. Secularism, the idea that government should be separate from religion, is the bedrock of any free and democratic society. It ensures that everyone, regardless of their beliefs, has equal rights and protections under the law. But when faith starts creeping into the halls of power, secularism starts to crumble. And when secularism crumbles, so too do our freedoms. We need to fight tooth and nail to protect this fundamental principle, or risk losing it altogether. Okay, so we've covered the bad news, but don't despair just yet. The good news is that we're not powerless against the harmful effects of blind faith. Here are a few effective ways we can fight back together. The first step to combating blind faith is to start thinking critically. Question everything, demand evidence, and don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. Encourage critical thinking in schools, homes, and communities. Remember, the more we question, the less likely we are to be fooled by dogma and superstition. Critical thinking is our best defense against the dangers of blind faith. We need to strengthen the wall of separation between church and state. That means no more faith-based initiatives in government, no more public funds going to religious institutions, and no more politicians using religion for their own gain. Secularism isn't about being anti-religion. It's about ensuring that everyone, regardless of their beliefs, has an equal voice in our society. Let's keep religion where it belongs, in the private sphere. You know, it's tough being the only sane voice in a sea of blind faith. That's why it's so important to find your tribe, a community of like-minded individuals who value reason, evidence, and critical thinking. Whether it's online forums, local meetups, or secular organizations, there are plenty of ways to connect with other freethinkers. We're stronger together, folks. In a world saturated with misinformation and alternative facts, it's more important than ever to base our decisions on evidence, not superstition. That means listening to scientists, experts, and data, not preachers, prophets, or ancient texts. Let's stop treating faith as a valid substitute for knowledge. It's time to embrace a worldview grounded in reality, not wishful thinking. We, the atheists, agnostics, freethinkers, skeptics, and rationalists of the world, need to make our voices heard. We need to speak out against the harms of blind faith and advocate for a more secular, just, and compassionate society. Don't underestimate the power of your voice. Every time we speak out against injustice, every time we challenge dogma, every time we promote critical thinking, we're making a difference. We're at a crossroads, folks. We can either continue down the path of blind faith, superstition, and division, or we can choose a different path, a path paved with reason, evidence, and compassion. It's time to evolve beyond belief. It's time to embrace a worldview grounded in reality, not ancient myths. It's time to build a world where everyone, regardless of their beliefs, can live free from fear and oppression. Join the movement, speak your truth, demand better. The future depends on it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Freethinker's Journey.